know how to unmute your mic?
Yes, I think I just did. Thanks.
Just make sure you mute it when you're not talking.
Okay, thanks.
I call to order the regular City Council meeting for Monday, October 2nd, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. This time, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate as to limit interruptions. Moving on to item number 1 on the agenda, and that is the roll call.
Burlingame.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Janser. Olson. Here. Pittner.
Here.
Pajagula. Pajagula.
I'm sorry, here remotely.
Ross.
Here. On to number 2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
This is America. It's America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item number 3 on the agenda is the mayor's report. Just a few meetings and events that we attended, or that I attended since the last city council meeting. Started out with the groundbreaking, or not the groundbreaking, but the ribbon cutting for the Burlington Flood Control Project. That was a great celebration out in Burlington, and we look forward to many more of those ribbon cuttings here in the future. Also attended the North Dakota League of Cities annual fall conference. We had a chamber board of directors, and then pretty much the rest of my calendar was filled up with events surrounding the Norse Kust Fest that really kind of culminated with our Home for the Holidays celebration on Saturday night during military night, where we had airmen there, and we presented, we had a ceremonial presentation of the Harley Davidson, and also talked about how much money we raised, and it's going to be an estimated right around $100,000 to help send the airmen home for the holidays. So thank you for all of those groups and organizations and people that purchased their tickets for that Harley. We really appreciate it. Also spoke to the first graders at Dakota Elementary and helped them hand out their monthly student awards. So it was quite the busy couple weeks for me. So if there's no questions, we can move on to item 4, and that is the city manager's report. Harold, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Reporting from Austin, Texas, where I'm attending the International City County Manager Association Conference. Learning a lot of things regarding approaches to city government, the challenges and issues that we're facing, and how some different cities are approaching those. Look forward to bringing that back to the staff and the council in the near future. As always, in your council packet is a memo prepared by me and the staff. I'd be happy to answer any questions with regards to anything outlined in that memo, or answer any other questions the council has for me at this time.
Are there any questions for our city manager? Carrie.
Hey, Harold. Who is going? I see you're starting interviews for the assistant city manager this month. Who is on that interview panel?
We have a mix of council representation, city staff representation, and some public representation. I will defer to Lisa Juntz. I believe it was the mayor, Alderman Pittner as the mayor and council president. We'd asked Alderman Burlingame if he would be interested in serving on that as well, but I think he has a conflict for that day. So we do have another council position if one of you would like to serve on that. And then we have a couple of department heads, primarily the new department heads of the organization. And then we have a few community leaders that we've invited to participate in that panel as well.
City Council.
And I would stipulate also ultimately, city ordinance does require city council ratification of any appointment of a department head. And even though we have not changed the ordinances with regards to the assistant city manager position. As such time as I would like to fill that position, I would bring that recommendation to council for ratification.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Evans, I'm still waiting to hear back from some people that I've reached out to. So at this time, I haven't gotten confirmation from the council members, and there's a few outside individuals that I haven't received any confirmation from, so.
Thanks, Lisa.
Are there any other questions? If not, we can move on to item number 5 on the
Yeah,
agenda.
this is Steve here. I had
Oh,
my
I'm
hand
sorry,
raised.
Steve, go ahead.
Okay, I had a question. Maybe it's more for our finance director about tax receipts and things like that. Maybe if Dave could come up.
He's on his way.
Okay, thank you.
He's here.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right, Dave?
Perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that you said the receipts, the income projections look quite good. How much extra at this point are you anticipating, especially from given the current really high price of oil?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, right now, with the average for oil and tax collections, other than the most recent payment, we've been trending just under about $500,000 a month. And $6 million is what we have included in the budget for the Hub City funding. So unless we see something that really changes dramatically, but just keep in mind that if prices normalize a little bit, that goes the other direction as well.
So net overall, what are you expecting in terms of the greater receipts for a year? Is it?
For 2024, we are
Yeah.
still looking at around the neighborhood of $6 million.
And that's what we're budgeting.
That's what we have included in the budget.
Okay, so hopefully we'll get significantly more than that.
Absolutely.
Right, but again, you also pointed out that our costs, particularly of borrowing, will go up. So even if the price of oil goes up, in some ways it's good for the state coffers and our coffers. It'll be offset to some extent by increases in bonding borrowing costs.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, and just keeping in mind that if we collect in excess of what we anticipated, that those funds are then available for a future budget cycle or a project that would come up in mid-year that would be appropriated through a budget amendment.
Okay, so at this point, it's really too early to tell.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be sure on that.
Anything else, Steve?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any other questions or comments? If not, we can move on to item number 5 on the agenda, and that's the city attorney's report. Steph?
Mayor and council, I submitted a written report, and it doesn't contain quite the exhaustive list as I usually provide of items that I review. I ran out of time while I was writing it, so it was as detailed as I could get before the agenda deadline. But in pertinent part, we have our new assistant city attorney starting this Wednesday. So Corbin Dickerson will be joining our office, and his first month will be under the Department of Defense's joint program, the SkillBridge program. So his first month's salary will be financed by the DoD, which was kind of a nice savings. And I think he is our first city employee that's been run through that program. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that progresses. But we're exciting. That's a long time coming, being at full strength in our office. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Steve, any questions? Hearing none, we will move on to item number 6 on the agenda. That's our consent agenda. We have 17 items on our agenda under the consent action item. And at this time, is there any that need to be pulled? Are there any consent items that need to be pulled? Steve, do you have any that need to be pulled? Hearing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any discussion? Is there any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
I'm sorry, this is Steve. I accidentally muted myself. I did have ask number 17 to be pulled earlier.
Then we have to, can we just do a friendly?
Yes. Yep. If there's no objection to pulling item 617 from the motion, then that can be considered amended.
I'm fine with that.
Okay with that? Is the second okay with that? Okay, moving on to the remaining 16 items on the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame. Yes. Evans,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Those 16 items were approved. Now moving on to item number 17. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Steve, do you have any discussion on this item? Steve?
Sorry, I'm not used to working on Teams. There was a very provocative article in the Minot Daily News within the past week, I think, about access issues. And I think the Renaissance Zone Committee was considering that. And I wanted to ask about the status of this particular request and subsequent requests. Will they be required to have automatic doors or electronic doors that will facilitate access by people with mobility issues?
Jonathan, do you want to come up and address that, please?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Padrogola, met last week on this item, and we had a recent communication from somebody who is active in the community and said that access was an issue. So we addressed it as quickly as we could in terms of having had that communication. I'm sorry to say that we didn't think about it more in advance, but certainly when we were questioned about it, staff took it to the board, the Renaissance Board, and they have a recommendation that should come to the council at the next council meeting with a specific idea in order to allow for power-assisted doors. And I think it was the view of the board, and certainly staff agrees, that it's the right thing to do to help people who have difficulty navigating, getting in and out of doors. They're heavy doors. You can be involved in the wind. And it's something that we will address specifically, but certainly we are going to recommend that we allow for power-assisted doors, both going forward as a requirement, and we'd like to be able to offer it to people that have already been approved and ask that they consider adding it as an add-on.
So the way this particular request is now, it wouldn't have that requirement, but you're anticipating there will be a requirement that, or an requirement that people will have to add those retroactively.
Well, you can't require them to do it retroactively, but they will be offered the opportunity to have it paid for retroactively, so that hopefully everyone who's been involved with the program will consider doing it. We think
this application was submitted before the news item was published, before the committee discussed it, correct?
Yes, this is, it was waiting on a couple items, but yeah, this was submitted well before that was considered.
So they submitted it in good faith under the old rules.
Absolutely. And, they signed the contract. It was approved by the board. But of course, the final approval is with the city council and not with the board.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very important. I guess I took it for granted that there would be that kind of access. I mean, with ADA and with all the architects and engineers involved. And I was very surprised to read that article in the paper and disappointed. But I think the idea of requiring for the future and offering kind of remediation, I think makes sense. It's not fair to change the rules in the middle of the game. But that was very discouraging to me that that my understanding of ADA wasn't being followed. But okay, thanks. That clears it up.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other questions for Jonathan on this issue? Lisa?
More of a comment, not necessarily a question for
Thank you,
Jonathan. But certainly I want to acknowledge, I know that I personally received an email, and perhaps others did as well, related to this item on the agenda tonight, asking that it be denied. And my correspondence with that individual, I shared my thought, and I share it here publicly, and that is that because the process has been followed, I don't feel that it would be right at this time to pull this item and deny it. They have, just as Alderman Padragula indicated, they have been working with the city in good faith. And with that, I think if the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, it's something that needs to pass. And so I will be voting in favor of the motion. But I did indicate that I think maybe there is a time and a need for further conversation about the facade improvement plan. And right now, we're not going to talk about it with this agenda item because I'm getting off task. But I wanted to acknowledge that the person did email us, and I don't think that this individual is alone. I think that there are others that have concerns, and it's likely something that we need to discuss further in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Is there anything further? Anything further? If not, please call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame? Evans?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda, that is action items. Item 7.1 was pulled from the agenda, moved to a later date. So we will move on to item 7.2, that is the adopt the 2024 budget ordinance and application resolutions establishing rates, fees, and charges. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second by Carrie. At this time, I think I'd ask our finance director, Mr. Lakefield, come up. He has a short presentation.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and sure, of course, we look at this and we hook it up and now it doesn't come up on the screen correctly. So we'll see how the slides work out when we get going. I just want to take a couple of minutes to clarify a few items that came up in regards to the budget at the public hearing and the first reading, as well as we'll end the presentation with a couple of housekeeping items that we need to address so we can get this thing finalized. All right. There we go. All right, just a couple of things, some stats here, and this has been updated. This is a slide I resurrected from a prior presentation, just to give you some context as far as the role in property taxes in the budget. So in the last 4 years, we've gone from funding just about 18% of our total budget by property taxes to just over 14% of the part of the budget that is funded by property taxes. A bulk of that goes to funding of public safety functions. That includes police, fire, dispatch, municipal court, those types of things in the narcotics task force. And the bulk of those public safety budgets are personnel costs. This is just, again, an updated slide for sales tax collections with a couple of previous years' collections on there, as well as the 5-year historical average. And we've looked at this graph a number of times. It's very difficult to have any degree of certainty as far as the collections. Year to date, this year has been a very solid year as far as overall collections. We're trending ahead of projection or ahead of budget, but we've had a couple of months in there where the collections weren't so good either. So we look forward to seeing what happens the rest of the year. I just heard an article on the news earlier today that some of the forecasts are out for the Christmas season, and I think that folks are, I would say, cautiously optimistic, but I don't think there's any degree of certainty in those projections either. This is just a different graph showing the red is year-to-date collections since 2016, and then the other bar is the total for the year. So we're just slightly ahead of where we were last year. So we'll end up a little bit ahead. And we did increase our forecast for revenues for sales tax collection in the 2024 budget to $12 million per penny, and that's up from $11.5 million per penny last year. Hub City oil and gas collections, and I have the data behind this as well. This year, until the most recent deposit that was just last week, we have been trending just under that $500,000 average. I think it was about $498,000 per month, which projects to just about $6 million for annual revenues, and that's what we have built into the budget for 2024. And when we came up with those forecasts, some of that was based on the state's forecasts for oil and gas revenues for the upcoming biennium and what the pricing was going to be. So we've tried to be consistent with what their forecast is, and we'll see what happens with that too. Right now, things look very optimistic, but that can change in a hurry as well. And there was some question about what was included in the budget as far as the oil and gas revenues. And what you see circled here is the portion that is included in the general fund revenue section. 5.219 million is included there, and the rest is included in the capital infrastructure budget. So the total between those two is $6 million. This is just a list, and it's a little tough to see on the slide, but we present this in the budget, and it's a few pages that just breaks down our operating categories. So you can see last year's budget, this year's budget, the change and the percentage of change. So when you look at this on its face, you can go through and see the categories that have had a significant increase or decrease. The word of caution here is you need some context behind these numbers to understand what's driving the changes here. And I'll show some examples of some of those that were mentioned. Water treatment supplies was one of the items that was brought up. And so we started looking at this just to make sure we could explain the changes. And this is the listing for the last 4 years for our bid prices for water treatment chemicals. So you can see some of those. Chlorine has increased 268% since 2020. Some of the other ones, 90% for ammonium sulfate, calcium nitrate, 24%, quicklime, 46%. So in 4 years, some of those costs have increased dramatically. We did include in there on the bottom the gallons treated for the last 3 years, and it's remained fairly steady, no significant increases. The big driver behind the increase in water treatment supplies is we have the NAS biota plant that will be coming online here, hopefully in 2024, maybe early 2025. But those costs are included in the 2024 budget. And when we look at the water treatment supplies line item for the biota plant, it's an increase of $1.7 million. So that is the bulk of the cost increase in that line item from 1 year to the next, is bringing that biota plant online. There were a couple other items that were included that were brought up too. I think it was tool allowance. And again, a big chunk of that is accounted for in this NAS biota accounts here as well. We have to fit that facility up with things, with ladders, safety equipment, all kinds of items that they have to have on premises there. So the total budget that we have for the biota plan is just over 3.6 million. That's the bad news. The good news is I think the federal government has recognized or acknowledged that that cost is their cost. So we anticipate that the federal government will be paying the cost of operating the NAS biota plant. So we have the $3.6 million in the budget on the expenditure side. We also have that in the budget on the revenue side too. So those costs should offset each other. This is just some historical information, and I've shown you this slide before too. I just wanted to point this out again, showing the different sources of revenue. The light blue line there is the property tax revenues. And then we also have sales tax collections on there. And you can see that property tax collections have increased until about 2018, and then they've kind of leveled off a little bit. Sales tax collections have actually declined in the middle period there and have started to rebound back to where they were back in about 2014, or getting close anyway. The top line there is the general fund revenues, and you can see that those have grown quite a bit more than either the property tax or the sales tax revenues. And one other graph here for comparison's sake, the top line is the general fund total cost, and the bottom line is the personnel salary and benefits lines. And the key takeaway here is that these two lines are diverging as we move to the right, just meaning that total costs are growing faster than the rate of cost for the personnel. Onto the housekeeping item, the one item that we would recommend that get addressed on this reading, when we proposed the preliminary budget, we had built in an increase of 4% for the health insurance premiums, and there's been a lot of discussion around that item that the actual cost is going to be about 0.5% of the increase. So either if we don't take action, or if the council does not take action on that, the 4% increase will remain in the budget. It's not spent, it will just go into fund balance at the end of the year. The other option is that we can make the change to reduce that to 0.5%. I've listed out the anticipated savings there. And one example of what could be done is to restore some of the funding that was built into the preliminary budget for the rehabilitation of the former City Hall building. As you recall, some of that funding was moved in the first reading of the budget to the quiet zone. So that's just one option that could be out there. And ultimately, that would be up to the council to decide how they want to do that. That's all I have tonight. I would certainly stand for any questions that you might have.
And you're going to stay close, aren't you, Dave?
Yes.
Are there any questions on Dave, for Dave? Steve, any questions for Dave?
Thank you, no.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, at this time, I think we'll take it, pretty much like we did before, one item at a time, clean it up, make it clean, and then move on to the next if there are any other amendments. Paul?
I guess I'll make the motion to reduce health insurance from 4% increase to a 0.5% increase.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I have a question.
Scott?
Sorry, Dave, I probably should have asked you this, but you had asked about or brought up the possibility of moving those funds to the City Hall remodeling. What is the amount that's currently in the City Hall remodeling? I know it was 1.522 million to start with, but.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Burlingame, if my memory serves me correct, you're right on track, and then we moved $1 million of that to the Quiet Zone project.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross, Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans. Yes. Olson.
Yes.
That amendment passes. Moving on, to the next one, would this be a good time to entertain, with the information that came out in the city manager's report, to entertain a motion on the PTO issue? Scott?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move to reconsider the vote on the PTO and sick time vacation issue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. Steph?
And just for the council's knowledge, the original motion was to allow current city staff to a one-time choice of the new PTO plan or to continue on the current accrual plan and all new employees get onboarded with a new PTO plan. That's the motion that's being reconsidered.
Scott, you want the mic? Go ahead, Scott.
I just want to say that for the members of the audience that don't know, I brought this back for reconsideration because we have been presented with some pretty significant data since the last time. Do we have, I don't know, who would we have to present that data to the group? I don't know, Lisa, do you want to do that?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Burlingame, I'm assuming you're talking about the survey data? Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. I was asked by an alderperson to conduct a survey with employees concerning what their choice would be with regard to either PTO or the sick leave, vacation sick leave option that we currently have. The survey did go out to employees. We had about 70% of employees who did participate in this survey. I have to say I'm very happy with that participation. We generally only get about 30%, so it was very well participated in. The total survey numbers came in at 313, with the majority of those, almost 69%, 67%, 208 employees coming back indicating that they would prefer the PTO option, and 105 employees coming back with the current option that is already out there, the current vacation sick leave option. I guess that's as much as I have as far as numbers go, but if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Lisa, if I can continue, what is, you obviously had more time to think about this afterwards as an HR person and also somebody that has contact with different supervisors. What is your professional opinion on how this having two policies would affect management and staff morale and all of the above?
My biggest concern, and as I stated in my letter to the council, is that our managers are the individuals that actually have to understand the policies. They're the first line individuals who will have to approve these policies. So although it does flow down to HR at some time, they're the ones that are going to have to understand if it's going to be a PTO or if it's going to be vacation or sick leave. They need to know those policies inside and out. When you have two different policies, you're sort of playing on two different rule books, as I stated. It's really difficult to, I believe, in my opinion, be completely non-biased when you have two different policies that you're reviewing.
Anything else, Scott?
I'm okay for now.
Is there any other questions, any other comments? Any further discussion?
Yes, well,
Steve.
Lisa's there. Yes, thank you. Can you see me raising my hand or not?
No.
Okay, I was pressing the raise the hand button. Yes, if I could ask or point something out, I guess I want to make a comment on what Lisa was presenting. First of all, I'm very pleased that we went out and got some data in terms of what employees feel. That's very welcome. I really applaud whoever was behind that, and certainly the HR department for running the survey. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to compliment Lisa, since she volunteered and came out saying she had written a letter raising concerns about it. We also received another letter from a department level manager, and I also wanted to compliment that. But I especially wanted to compliment Lisa on her candor. It's always an issue and a dynamic when what the council does is not exactly what staff would like, or when staff sees serious problems with what we've done. And I think in this case, it was handled remarkably well. Offhand, in the 14 years I've served on council, I don't remember a department head ever coming to us and in such a forceful, assertive, and candid and respectful manner saying, look, you guys, you made this decision. I see some real problems with it, and these are the problems. and basically saying, are you sure you want to go ahead and do this? And to me, this is almost as important as the PTO issue itself. The fact we had one department head, Lisa in this case, again, I'll use her name because she came out about it, saying very frankly to us, think about it, think about it again and reconsider it. And I think that's a real sign of professionalism, maturity, and confidence and trust, I think, in the administration and Harold and us. And I wanted to publicly recognize that and thank her for her candor and her assertiveness. That means a lot here. In the past, department heads have reacted very differently, and city managers have. Some have acquiesced, some have grumbled, some have been actually, I think, passive aggressive about it. And this is exactly the opposite. And I think this is what I think department managers and department heads should do, and other staff. If they think we've made a mistake, I think they have an obligation to tell us. And I really, really, really appreciate it. That means a lot that we have that kind of an organization where people feel free to say, look, you guys, I think you made a mistake. Please think about it. And yet be respectful of our ultimate authority in making the policies. So I really, really appreciate that letter that Lisa sent and the issues she raised in the very professional and mature way in which she raised the matter. That means a lot to me.
Thank you, Steve. Any further discussion? Lisa.
Thank you, and I'm appreciative to Alderman Burlingame for bringing this back for reconsideration. I was one of the three council members who did vote against this 2 weeks ago, and just because I had an inkling, we didn't have all the information that Ms. Jensen was able to share with us following the meeting, but I had an inkling that it was going to be difficult for department heads to manage two different plans, and I also felt that it would be a situation that was going to be kind of bad for morale, because you have two employees working in one department on two different plans. I just think that the situations will arise where it will be difficult, and one will at least perceive that they were favored over the other, and to avoid that situation, I think, is in our best interest. We know that whatever decision we make, not everyone's going to be happy. That's very clear, even by the survey results. A third of our employees, or at least a third that took the survey, indicate that they would like to stay with the same plan. 2/3 indicate that they would like to participate in the PTO plan. So whatever we do, we're going to make a difficult decision, and someone is going to be disappointed. But in my opinion, and a lot of it is, again, based on all of the work that came out of the ad hoc committee, I think that PTO is a good plan to move to, and that's what I would like to see us do this evening.
Any further discussion? Scott.
Sorry, I'll just speak again. This has been one of the most difficult issues I've dealt with in my short time here on the council, and I've heard from so many employees and valuable employees who didn't want to switch to PTO. The last thing I would ever want to do is anything that would make life more difficult on so many valued employees. I've said many times that if I was starting a company from scratch, PTO is a better way to go. I think that it creates a lot of opportunity for newer employees. I believe that it also creates a lot of opportunity for perhaps a little bit less management decision into whether or not I get to take a day off or not. And I think that helps. That being said, I've never wanted to disregard the employees who supported it. When I heard what Lisa said in her email, and when I saw this survey, I thought it definitely was worth us having this conversation tonight. And that's why I chose to bring it back. It's an extraordinarily difficult vote, because as Alderwoman Olson said, no matter what we do, we're going to take off either 2/3 or 1/3 of our people. And, that's tough, but it's ultimately what we were elected to do as well.
Thank you, Scott. Anything further?
Mr. Mayor?
Steve.
Hello. Yes, thank you. I really appreciate Scott bringing this up too. I have significant second thoughts about supporting the option plan, particularly in the face of this additional data. And I recognize this will make life for managers and department heads harder. I still will continue to favor giving employees the option. What still troubles me is the fact that line staff seem to be against it, and the committee that Mark chaired, very much favored it, but the people who voted for it on that committee were also department heads and managers of various kinds. So I'm concerned about it in a way, a two-tier or maybe a systematic difference between line staff who seem to favor the old system and other people, bringing in supervisory roles. I too would favor the idea of a PTO plan. I think it makes the most sense to me, but I, again, like Scott, have to listen to the employees who vehemently oppose it, people who put in decades in working for the city, who've been good and faithful servants. And if they feel so strongly about this, I'm reluctant to go ahead and force them to go to a PTO plan. And I openly acknowledge that, Lisa's right. It will be a headache. There's no question about that. But I'm just concerned about alienating so many people who've worked so long and hard for us. The good news, I think, in a sense, is that if 2/3 of the employees are already on board, that if the administration, if HR and the city manager maybe boost up their efforts to convince employees of the value of the PTO plan, I think they won't have too far to go, since, again, almost 2/3 favor the PTO plan. So if anything, I think this might be an incentive to the administration to push it a little bit harder and explain a little bit more carefully what the advantages are. And I agree that there are advantages. So maybe there needs to be a little bit more assertive marketing campaign, if you will. And I think we'll get if that's done, I think we'll get very close to a large percentage, favoring it, which will make the administration somewhat easier. So I'm glad it brought up again, but I think I will still support giving employees the freedom as much as I like the idea of a PTO plan.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Lisa?
Two questions for Ms. Gent. The first, for veteran employees who have been, well, everyone's on the current plan, but if we switch to a PTO plan, will they lose their sick leave?
No, under the proposed recommendations, the sick leave will be frozen as a fail-safe. So in the event, for instance, if someone was going on a short-term disability policy and the claim was not approved, the frozen sick leave would be able to be used. There would be other opportunities. It would probably be a one-by-one case, determining, when those sick leave hours could be used, but they will be frozen and still available.
Thank you. And then my second question would be in response to Alderman Padrigula's last statement. The way that I understood this, and perhaps this is a decision that will be made following this decision, but I thought it was a one-time decision, that if there are two plans, employees will have one opportunity to choose their plan and not go back and forth. Is that correct?
Alderwoman Olsen, that is correct. It's impossible for us to have employees going back and forth on two completely different types of accrual. There would be no way we could honestly administer that, even with a new system.
So a marketing plan, and I'll certainly allow Alderman Padrigula to respond to that again, but my assumption is that the marketing plan would be very soon, prior to the end of the year, correct?
That is correct.
Any other questions or comments for Lisa? Any other questions or comments on the question?
I'm sorry, if I could respond to Lisa Olson.
Yes. Go ahead,
Thank
Steve.
you. I appreciate your courtesy, Lisa. Yes, no, I understand this has to be a one-time choice, and once you've made that choice, you can't go back on it. But my understanding also is it will take a little bit of time before employees have to make that one-time choice, and that should offer administration a little bit of time to further sell the plan, if you will. Yeah. So I do understand that.
The decision has to
Carrie.
be made by November 1st, right? Yeah, there's not time, Steve. It's a November 1st decision.
Why does it have to be November 1st?
We do have to build the new accrual system into the computer and also do testing on it.
Okay, so it will be implemented as of January 1 then?
Correct.
Okay, November, so that gives you 2 months to put it into effect. And it's now October 2nd, so it's a month. Employees would have a month, and you'd have an employee a month to convince them of the value of the PTO plan. I think that should be adequate.
Anything else, Steve?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else? So what we are discussing is the motion to reconsider. It's not discussing whether we're going PTO or not. We're just, this roll call vote is whether we are going to reconsider the issue from before. Call the roll.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
I'm sorry, yes.
Ross.
Yes. So the motion to reconsider passes. Now
The original motion's on the floor.
the original motion is on the floor. So what are the wishes of the council?
Can you just read the original motion, please?
I don't have it in. front of
I
me.
have it up from
Sorry.
the minutes that were just approved. So the original motion is to allow city staff, it says to a one-time choice of the new PTO plan or to continue on the current accrual plan and all new employees get onboarded with the new PTO plan. That's the motion that is being reconsidered.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, could you please repeat that? I'm sorry, my connection here is acting up.
Certainly.
So the original motion is to give employees the choice, a one-time choice, and all new employees, though, would have to go with the PTO plan.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So then would a no vote on this, would that take us strictly back to a PTO plan? That's in the original budget?
If the motion fails, then any member can proceed with a new motion.
I do believe a no vote would go back to the PTO option since short-term disability is in the budget. Am I correct, Dave? Or Harold? I bet Harold would be able to.
Yes, the short-term disability plan is built into the budget, and really that's the only financial alteration to the budget with regards to PTO.
I'm sorry, if I could just clarify, I became confused again. So voting in favor of the motion that's on the table would give us this two-tier system, and where employees could choose either the PTO plan or the old plan, correct?
Correct.
Yes, the current motion is making it optional for employees to choose which plan they want to be on. If this motion were to fail, administration would move forward with making PTO
Great.
the system for all employees.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Padragula, Padragula,
Sorry, my mic keeps going up. Yes.
Ross,
No.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans.
No.
Olson,
No.
Pittner,
No.
motion fails.
Moving on, I think one item of cleanup on this that we did not discuss during, what are the wishes of the council with the savings from moving from 4% to the 0.5%, that approximately $260,000? What
I
are
make
the,
a motion, we save it.
we have a motion, is there a second?
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Evans,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Yes.
Burlingame.
Paul, do you now have sound effects before you vote?
Somebody won. Now, the next step in the process is to take a vote on the budget.
Return to the main motion if
Main
there's
motion
no
with
further.
amendments.
Are there any further amendments? Anything further? So we do have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the budget. Is there any further discussion? Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I'm going to come out and say I'm going to support this budget. I'll share a little anecdote. And I get the perception that can come out when the budget process comes around, or the budget hearings, I should say, come around, because this budget process is more than a couple of meetings. This is actually numerous meetings. I had a call from a constituent last week and was very upset and very asked me to reach out, was very distraught with the perception of the way the meeting went and the hearing went last time. You know, they were concerned that individuals came and spoke and we didn't even sleep on it, right? We didn't even take a night to let it sink in. And I get that. I get the perception of that, because you come to the budget hearing and this gets put on the agenda last Thursday and seems like we've got 4 days to look at it. And then we come and vote on it and we hear input from citizens. And one thing that I was sure to share with the constituent was, this is on more than 2 meetings. This starts in March, April, May, June, July. So the nights that I've slept on this have been many. And they haven't been after one time of being posted on the agenda. There's many sacrifices that everybody that sits up here, and department heads through budget tours, budget process, budget hearings, department head meetings to discuss and to craft this budget. This is many hours of work. I'm currently missing the Cardinals play the Eagles tonight to be here, because that's the sacrifices we make. And no, it's not an NFL game. That's my daughter's game. I've missed many of them. I missed many a family event to be here, because that's what we choose to do. We understand the sacrifices. So I understand it when a constituent calls and is upset because it seems like we don't care or we're not listening. And in reality, I get upset a little bit, and I understand it, because that's the perception. And it's hard for me to make it to those meetings. It's hard for department heads to be at those meetings and for every member of council to be at those meetings. So it's hard for me to expect a citizen who's not elected or not a city employee to be at those meetings. So I get it. And I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the work that does go into these. This is not a rubber stamp that we put onto these budgets. It is not a rubber stamp. So I have slept on this budget for almost 6, 7, 8 months. And I just want to make sure that work that's done by department heads and other council members is recognized and appreciated. And again, I want to thank staff and council members for all their hard work that went into this budget, because I do believe this moves and positions our community forward. It addresses hurdles that our community faces with whether you believe it or not, with the financial implications as far as property taxes in mind in every one of those decisions. So again, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. It was a cordial conversation. We had a great enlightening on both sides. So again, I get the perception, but all of those meetings as well, the budget tours, the budget workshops, those are open meetings. Those are posted on the agenda. Those are open to the public. So, and I encourage, if you are passionate about city government and the budget process, please don't come in October. Come in March, April, May, and I'll say again, staff. We have some of the best staff that you could ask for. We had some individuals, and I'll give them a public shout out. We had a couple individuals speak at the budget hearing last, and we're concerned about being elderly and the effects of rising property taxes. I called Damon Druce, the assistant city assessor, after the meeting, and I asked him, because I saw him hand a piece of paper to those individuals. I said, "What did you give them, Damon?" He's like, "I gave him a homestead credit application." There are resources out there to individuals. There are resources, and there are, whether it's through applications to the state or through the city, or whether it's through information through our staff that can help guide people with their concerns. So please don't be afraid to reach out to city staff, to council members, to the mayor, to the city manager. I know Dave likes taking phone calls. So again, call the finance director, and they'll be more than happy to answer your questions. I guess I just wanted to share that, those thoughts.
Thank you, Paul. Any other comments? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. So this is the 13th time that I've gone through a budget series, and I think that Council President Pittner hit on most of the points, that it is a long process. And we do consider all of these things for a very, very long time. And, you know, I'll go to the grocery store. I was walking around at the North Coast Fest last week. Anywhere I go, people will come up and say, you guys have a really hard job. And sometimes we do it because we love it and we want to serve our community. But I think this is the hardest job that we have, because you have to balance the needs of the city with the pocketbooks of our residents. And it's not an easy decision to make, and we do lose sleep over it. So I want to reiterate that this is a long process. We're grateful for the people who do give us input. I'm going to say I didn't get a lot of input this year. 1 or 2 emails, a few people who did show up to speak at our public meeting. But in a community of 50,000 people, you'd think that I would hear from more than 5 or 6 people. So I wanted to share that. And I, for 13 years since I've been sitting up here, I've tried to be an advocate for women and children. And I know that sometimes the situation is going to arise where someone's income is just so fixed, is so tight, that even a small increase in their property taxes is significant. And I want to encourage all of them, just as Council President Pittner did, please look for the resources that are available. The homestead tax credit has been around for a long time, and I think that it has even improved after action was taken in the last legislative session. So don't worry about paying for groceries or paying for your property tax. Please reach out, because there are resources, and take advantage of those.
Good points, Lisa. Scott?
Yeah, as Alderwoman Olson talks about her 13th, this is my first, and I'll give a few impressions to kind of reiterate and maybe add my own take on some of this. It was a lot easier when I wasn't on this body to sit back and say, here's what I think that should be done. It's a lot more difficult when you're talking to constituents from all sides and all kinds of issues. Everybody would like to have the absolute best services possible and not pay anything for them. But it doesn't work that way. If we want good streets, we're going to need to continue to invest in them. As we heard tonight, if we want clean water, we're going to need to continue to invest in them. If we want our firefighters and our first responders and our police to come when we need them, we're going to need to invest in them. And if you think it's expensive now with our health insurance, with our salaries, it's a hell of a lot more expensive if we have to replace them. And so we need to do everything we can to create an environment that our city employees want to be here. And we want to do that without increasing taxes. We want to do that without having to do anything to inconvenience anybody. And the thing that gets lost in this, and to kind of reiterate what Alderman Pittner said, is there were significant things asked for and significant changes made but on this dais based on trying to hold the line on property taxes. With that being said, what in the world that in anything's existence right now has stayed the same in the last year? The cost of everything has went up, including the cost for our firefighters, our police, our water, our streets, and all of the above. The cost of everything in the world right now is expensive. And I wish I could say that we could change that. I wish I could say I knew exactly how to change that. But this was a heck of a lot of work by some very dedicated professionals and a handful of elected officials up here working a lot of hours to get to this point. Do I feel wonderful about this budget? Heck no, I don't. But I also feel wonderful about the process, and I feel great about the people that are involved with the state, or with the city. So I appreciate all the work, and I look forward to, well, I don't know if I look forward to it, but I will be voting yes on this.
Any further discussion? Steve?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to echo what's previously been said, and I think at my end emphasize the participatory nature of the budget process and how involved the council has been from the very beginning. I think we've made it abundantly clear to the city manager, department heads, and lower level staff that we want the budget to be as lean as possible. And I personally, I don't go to bed too many nights without thinking about how can we be more efficient and more effective. Sometimes, though, you do need to spend money to gain that efficiency, and I think that's what we're doing. We're also playing catch up for years, if not decades, of inadequate investment in our infrastructure, both human and physical infrastructure. one of the things I want to emphasize, I think, as Scott said, is that the council has been very actively involved in our budget tours, which last, 3, 4, 5 days, something like that. We went out, we talked with staff at all levels. When we heard proposals, we often said, look, why do you really need this? And we asked for explanations. We really pushed them on some things. And sometimes we said, no, we don't think you need this. Or why don't we wait a year to see if you really do need it over the long run, particularly when it comes to new personnel. So we were very questioning, very skeptical, very cautious from the very beginning. We weren't cynical, but we were skeptical. And we asked for explanations even before it made it onto paper in the budget hearings. I would strongly encourage staff the public to attend those. And we had extensive back and forth, to and fro discussions with staff at all levels and just about every department about their perceived needs. And we also tried to look at the bigger picture of what the city as a whole needed, not just what each department needed. So I feel comfortable with this. Is everybody going to be pleased? Of course not. But I think it's the best we could achieve at this point, trying to offer, optimal services, quality of service to the public, and yet be as efficient and thrifty as possible. So I feel comfortable with it. And again, there's a lot that went on for months, and sometimes in the case of certain items and certain requests for years, before it got actually into the proposed budget that the city manager submitted to us. So this thing has been vetted up and down, right and left, repeatedly. And it's the best process. The process has been such that I think it's the best product we can come up with. That's humanly possible for the 7 of us, trying to juggle and balance all these different issues. So believe me, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Thank you, Steve. Is there anything else? If not, just a few thoughts. I do want to give some pat on the back to Harold Stewart, the department heads. They took direction from the council very well and got us as lean as a budget that I believe we can possibly do. I also want to credit this body up here. This has been, I've had my full year of being the mayor, and I think the chemistry, the openness, and the hard work that everybody up here on the dais put together on this budget. Once again, it makes me proud to be serving Minot. And I believe when it comes down to the bottom line, we made a decision on this budget that is a good decision for all of Minot. A good decision for all of Minot. So I will be supporting this. If there's nothing else, please call the roll.
Hittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to item number 8, that is personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to address the council to step forward. Now is your opportunity to step forward to address the council.
My name is Scott Samuelson, a resident of Minot. I'm actually really, Mr. Mayor and City Council, I'm really disappointed in this body. I've been really paying attention to this body over the last year and a half. I've noticed a lot of things, and I truly believe that you're not listening. I'm going to explain why I say that. I've been at many meetings over the last year, and the only person that pays absolute attention to people when they're speaking up here is our Mayor, Tom Ross. Most of the time, the rest of you are looking at your computers, down on your desk, leaning back, maybe thinking about where you were supposed to be tonight instead of being here. It gets really frustrating to watch that. There were 6 people here at our last meeting to protest this budget. There were 0 in favor of it. You guys closed the public hearing, and there were amendments made to the budget. I believe there were about 4 or 5 of them. all of them to increase the budget. The first one that was brought up to raise the budget, the person presenting it didn't even know how much it was going to raise the budget. And neither did the next one. The only one that we knew the numbers to was the quiet zone. You didn't even know the amount that you were trying to increase it. The very next night, I went to the Ward County meeting. As of right now, I sat in that meeting. Before we were going, I told my wife I really didn't want to go because they probably wouldn't listen anyway. I sat in a meeting and I watched more than half a dozen people oppose their budget. And I watched as those people talked to the commissioners. All 5 of them were engaged, were looking at them, were paying attention. One of them was even taking notes. When they closed the public hearing, they all decided to wait and I guess to sleep on it. Because they wanted to consider the input that they got at that meeting. Before the meeting was adjourned, something happened that kind of surprised me. The chairman of the commission asked a question of the people that were in that room. It just so happened, it happened to be about the end property tax, just what people had thought about it. It was a really good conversation that came up after that. Everyone was listening. Everyone was engaged. All 5 of the commissioners were engaged and listening. And it was a discussion. There were people there that were in favor of it. There were people that not, and explaining why. They closed the meeting. I had the opportunity to talk to every one of those commissioners and thank them for listening. It's the first time that I've experienced that, getting up, talking where everybody's engaged and listening. And I thank you, Mr. Ross, for always doing that. There's one thing that I wanted to leave you with, and I wasn't going to, but at the September 5th meeting, the president of the city council said, and I quote, "We were elected to represent the people that voted for us." Mr. Pittner, I voted for you, and you're not representing me. And neither are the rest of you, because I voted for all of you. And I will apologize to the citizens of Minot for those votes. I won't do it again. Thank you.
Now is your opportunity to come before the council.
Good evening, John McMartin, 213 7th Street Southeast. I rise tonight and I must apologize that I missed the public hearing last week because it sounds like I would have been the lone one supporting your proposed budget, which is exactly what I'm doing tonight. I've got a couple of anecdotes and I've got a couple of things to tie in with the overall discussion about taxes that's going on in the community and the state. I'm reminded of the cartoon where there's 2 old guys, and you know, I can say that because I am one of those old guys these days, riding in a bus, and one of them says to the other, "A lot of damn improvements are around here these days, and I voted against every one of them." We didn't get ahead in this community and be able to grow to over 50,000 population by sticking our head in the sand and not trying to make improvements. There needs to be a three-legged stool in this state, and I'm going to reference it now, and I'm going to come back to it towards my close. Income tax, sales tax, and property tax. The state has all of these. Local only has two. Combinations of sales tax and property tax for the project has made Minot a better place in which to live and work, and given people a reason to want to come here, open a business, expand their business, and move on. Some people don't think there's any oil activity in Minot. And I, again, am reminded when Senator Wardner did a field looking and seeing what was going on in the Minot area, a business out on the east end of town, and one of the legislators that was with him said, "Why would you want to be in Minot? You got to drive out towards Watford City to do your work." And the young man, who was probably in his late 30s at that time, said, "Sir," he said, "I moved here from West Texas. At my last job, I drove 8 hours from my point of departure to where I had to go to work. Driving from here to Watford City is nothing." So we do have growth, and the things that we do to make our community better make a difference. And it is the quality of life that we build, whether it's the city, the school district with a new high school, or what's going on in the parks. I've watched and read the comments that have been made, and recently in the letters to the editor, one writer compared Minot to Fargo. Except that writer didn't tell the whole story. When sales tax was approved for local government, Fargo passed a sales tax on all utilities. The legislature realized the error of their way and quickly changed that. But Fargo still collects a sales tax on all of the utilities that the residents in Fargo pay. And not only that, Fargo uses special improvements to build everything out in town and do a lot of their maintenance. So yes, you could say their mill levy is a little bit less than Minot's, but that's not an apples to apples comparison. They do things differently, but rest assured, those residents are paying a lot in sales tax for utilities and in special improvements for their street lights, their curb and gutter, their everything that gets built in a new area, and then when the maintenance is done. I grew up in North Dakota. I lived in Montana for about 18 years. In 1990, when I moved here in August, I was driving a 6-year-old S10 Blazer. In March of 1990, I had to relicense my Blazer. I paid roughly $1,500 for that license plate. And I did because in Montana, there is no sales tax. It's property tax and it's income tax. And in Yellowstone County, one of the higher counties in the state, you pay personal property tax on your automobile. For the city, the county, the weed board, school district, the parks, whoever has got a mill levy, that goes against your car. The suggestion that the state is going to fund all local needs in the ongoing debate is, to say the least, a pipe dream. Look at the legislative battles that we go and talk about and deal with between east and west, rural and urban. and contemplate the needs of the local communities and the ability to have people react and to have resources that they can use to react to the needs of the community rather than begging the legislature and watching it go elsewhere. Some of that can be seen in how things have gotten funded, whether it's flood control or water. We can continue to invest in our local community, or we can sit back and just be two old guys riding on a bus, bitching about everything we see outside the window. Thank you for supporting the community. Thank you for doing what you did in terms of approving the budget. Good night.
Now is the opportunity if you wish to come forward and address the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike Blessum, 1607 13.5 Street Southwest. I just wanted to echo a couple things. First of all, Scott Samuelson's comments on the budget process across the city. I spoke in front of you folks as well as the county commission and the school board. And I got to tell you, the county commission had this right. It was an interactive process with the citizens to understand what was going on, and they were actually receptive to the words that were brought. They literally got up the next day or when they had their meeting and said, you know what, this caused us to rethink the role of government, which if you remember, that's what I'm asking all of you to do. As you take a look at the future of our city and where we're headed, because part of the problem that we've got budget-wise is that we're funding things that were never the purview of government. They should be taken on by the citizens of our city. They should be taken on by the wonderful nonprofits that we have working in our city already today. And just to give you one fast example of that, you know, there was in two of the local budgets, there was funding for Project B. I talked to a representative from another nonprofit in the city and talked about what that means for homelessness and things like that in the city. I was flabbergasted to understand that there are 9 different nonprofits actively working on different aspects of the homeless problem in our city, doing a wonderful job today. Our county and city are funding 1 of the 9. How do we pick winners and losers like that? How do we do it? That's the kind of things that we need to start rethinking. The county was willing to do it. The county is willing to step back and say, let's think for a minute. And I applaud them. The numbers that they changed aren't going to change every one of our pocketbooks, but it starts the process of thinking what that actually should look like going forward. Now, I believe that your process was pretty good. I'll tell you, the school board process, I feel, is a disgrace. I spoke in front of them. I got cut off. There was 2 of us speaking that night. I got cut off at the 3-minute mark. I understand that's the rule. But prior administrations, Jim Rosted as president has always let people move on if they're not ranting and raving. They decided to go that way. They had no questions, didn't even discuss their budget. So I commend you at least tonight for having a discussion, talking about the items. I believe you've had a good process. I don't doubt that. You've worked hard to get to where we are tonight. My last point from tonight's meeting, I applaud you when you realize the gain or the savings from the healthcare. That's a great thing. You know, you didn't immediately decide, oh man, where can we put that money? But I'll remind you whose money that is. Leaving it in the account for future spending means that it's still taking that from the people whose money it actually is. So I wish you'd have taken that next step, which is to direct the city manager to figure out how to reduce the budget itself and reduce the mills that are coming out of our pockets. Because it's not your money to spend, it's our money. Thank you.
Now is your opportunity to come and speak before the council. If not,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Lisa.
may I respond?
Yes.
And I know I'm sitting up here, but I'm responding as a resident of Ward County. I did watch the budget meeting that has been referenced twice. I watched it online. And it's great that people had a positive experience there. All of our citizens, all of our residents should have a positive experience when they come before any one of our elected boards. But I do want to just differentiate the process. They approve their budget at 1 meeting. We have 2 readings. And so in between our first reading and our second reading is the opportunity that people are given to reach out to us again. And I can tell you that in 2 weeks, I've had 0 phone calls. I've had 0 emails. I've had 0 people come up to me anywhere and visit with me about the budget.
Any? Paul?
I'll take a minute to respond here. Thank you. Do I think of where I should be when I'm up here? I think about my kids, every single item that comes up on this budget, okay? I think about my family and how that affects the future of this community and how I want it to be a community that I'm proud of living in and that my family's proud of living in. And to say that this council isn't willing to discuss things, Mr. Samuelson, you came to a meeting previously last year that I wasn't at, but I was at virtually. I asked Alderwoman Evans to reach out to you and grab your phone number so that I could talk to you, and you refused to give her a phone number, which is fine. That's you're right. But don't tell me that you're sitting here willing to discuss things when you, in the past, have not been willing to discuss things. And then you had also stated in that phone call, because I reached out to a mutual friend of ours through the power of social media, to get your phone number because I felt like it was misrepresented what I had said. And one of the things you had said to me was, that was the first time you'd ever been to a city council meeting. And I said, isn't that part of the problem? That we can have individuals that have lived here their entire lives and have never been to a city council meeting, but to complain when something they don't like, be a part of the process, be part of the positives and the negatives, be a part of the process. And that's, no one has to come. We all chose to be here. We all chose to run, get the signatures, be on it. But we're listening. And yes, I do think about my kids. I do think about being home when I'm up here because that's why I'm here. So that I have a home in this community that I want to go home to, that I want other people to go home to. So don't ever accuse anyone of taking this lightly up here. That is not the case. And I take deep offense to it, which is my right as an individual and your right to make those comments. But it's a big crock of BS to sit up here and say that people are discrediting and this is a flawed process. It's an embarrassment to make those comments.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Steve. It's
If I
yours.
could also respond, I don't want to kind of show the vehemence that the council president showed, but I did want to point out a couple of things. I don't want to be unduly defensive. I know that most people on the council take their job very seriously and they put a lot of time and effort into it, and they do pay attention to what people say. In my case, I can assure you, particularly Mr. Samuelson, that I listen very carefully and very thoroughly. There are times when I will consult my computer to look up an ordinance or some fact that's being contested, or to take notes. I listen by taking notes. I'm trained as a scientist. I'm trained as a forensic investigator. I document, I take notes constantly. I listen. That's the way I listen. So I want to assure people if they see me writing, it's probably me taking notes on what's happening. I also want to point out that people can multitask. Just because you are looking at your computer doesn't mean you're not listening to someone. Most people, even occasionally me, can do several things at the same time. I, in addition, want to point out that we get a lot of opinion and a lot of input from people outside of council meetings. We run into people at the grocery store. We may get a phone call. We may run into a person at an event. All the input we're getting isn't solely limited to the council meetings and the formal input, citizen input sessions. The logistics really aren't conducive to a discussion. It's usually a one-way process. We don't, according to our parliamentary procedures, allow a whole lot in the way of debate, and that's something I've been concerned about. I don't know that we should be getting into, put it this way, there are some problems with discussing issues in this formal of a forum. If we all sat around a table, or if we had a community input meeting, I think that might be a little bit better. But I just want to assure people that we do listen. I do listen very hard. There will be some constraints imposed by the artificial nature of this setting and rules of parliamentary procedure. Yeah, so again, just because I'm not quite sure what you would do to show your attention, but I can just guarantee you that I am listening and listening very hard. And we have, historically, I should also point out, we have thought of the role of city government. Several years ago, we basically dumped the recreation function that we had performed for decades and many people were very proud of. We decided that seemed to be more a function of the park board, and we gave that up. We gave that up willingly and voluntarily. We also cooperated with other governmental entities, particularly in our forestry program. So I think we've thought about this. People like the county commissioners, I would point out that a few years ago, we proposed unanimously, the city council unanimously was in favor of merging the county and the city public libraries. Once county commissioner opposed that. That cost the taxpayers $600,000 over a period of 10 years, plus a lot higher quality and more resilient library services. So we were in the lead there of trying to consolidate and coordinate and work more effectively together. I think a lot about what's the proper role for government. Again, I've come to the conclusion the one we have now is pretty decent. I'm certainly willing to entertain alternatives. And I'd like to point out that the council has not just entertained, but followed through with various alternatives in the past. So this is not a rubber stamp by any means, and it's not a situation where we have our minds made up beforehand. I can assure you we take it seriously and we try to be open-minded. At least I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments from the council? If not, we will move on to item number 9. That's miscellaneous and discussion items. 9.1, the results of the police department space needs and feasibility assessment.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the moment you've all been waiting for. I just want to give a couple opening comments before I invite EAPC up to present the information on our space needs study. If you remember, this process was approved in December of 2022. That's when EAPC was selected, and our work began in January of 2023. So 10 months later, we're finally at the point where we're providing some information to you. A lot of hard work went into that to get to the report side, and I would like to personally thank all of the different department members, city staff, and the EAPC folks for the work that they've done with us. Just like to remind council that this isn't a finished product. This isn't a design of a police department that you're seeing tonight. This is simply a study of the space that we need, and is the current facility a fitting location for us? And municipal court was the second piece of that. Trying to accomplish what can we do as far as space needs for the police department and the municipal court. The focus on tonight's presentation is the space. It's not the layout. So just keep that in mind. You've all been through our current facility and through City Hall, so you're aware of some of the different components, but you'll see some of the old look and some of the new look tonight as far as space goes. But we're not really here to debate whether or not a certain thing belongs in a certain area. Just in the interest of time, I know everybody wants to get out of here. I think if we try to maintain most of the questions to the end when they get to the question slide, that might speed it up a little bit. So if you take notes, that might help out. But feel free if there's something that you need clarification on to open up to this staff from the APC. This presentation is about the space study. It's information. We'll be coming back in November to actually try to get some input on what you would like to see based on this information. So tonight's not really about the police department or municipal court. It's about you receiving the information you need to make a decision in the future. And just finally, I'll turn it over to EAPC. I'm not sure exactly who's coming up, but I know they have several members here, and I'll let them present and take your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll just do some quick comments while Mike sets up. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, first and foremost, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for the trust to do this commission in the first place. I'd like to introduce our team. My name is Alan Dostert. I'm the president and CEO of EAPC. I have with me Mike Clark. He leads our civic sector. And in the back, I have Gloria Larsgaard. She's our office manager here in Minot. And I want to start with just kind of talking quickly about the process. We have 6 steps that we will go through. In these steps, we have converted those into basically tasks. And we'll go through each of those and try to be very, very brief with that. And so we can get to the end, because it's steps 4, 5, and 6 that really mean a lot to this presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Not coming up on everybody's screens, I'm assuming.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
All it needed was the chief to step in the room over there. Scared the technology into place. Thank you, chief. Sorry about that brief delay there. So we did this process in 6 steps. Each one of them kind of feeds the next step as we go along. And our presentation tonight is going to just take us through each of those tasks, each of the 6 tasks. So task number 1. Task number 1 is lean. Lean is a consensus building process that we used in order to ensure that this didn't turn into a study of what does the police department think they need. We had multiple people from the city involved in the study. So on the left are the main players from the police department. That is not everybody who participated. There were a great many people from the police department on our team. But you can also see that there are representatives there from the municipal court, from the city council, city administration, finance, city engineering, and facility maintenance. All of them participating, sharing their thoughts about how this process should work and what the end result, a successful end result, would look like. Part of that lean process was to develop the opportunity statement you see up on the screen. In the interest of brevity here, I'm not going to read this whole statement, but I will read the bottom 5 comments. These are elements that the team thought were important to a successful product here. To bring safety and liability issues into full compliance and in line with contemporary best practices. To improve privacy and process efficiency for both the personnel and citizens. To ensure the long-term value of this investment. To create a welcoming environment that promotes professionalism and wellness, inspiring pride in personnel and the citizens. To proactively plan for potential growth or adaptation in the planned spaces as needs change over the next 25 years. Another part of that lean process was to look a little bit more closely and to work more closely with staff and ask staff what they needed to see in the building. I'm not going to try and read through all 8 of these, but they are developed into 2 groups, must have and should have. Some of the important ones that I will pick out here: efficiency, functionality, workflow, the ability to do their jobs essentially without having to run from one end of the building to the other to do it. Welcoming environment. It is a police department, but that does not mean that everybody who comes in there should have a bad day. Promotes professionalism. The police department is working hard to encourage good, solid officers to come work here. They need a professional environment for that. You can read through these. It's all in the report. All of the information you're seeing here comes directly out of the report that was part of your packet. So lean got us started, developed our goals, developed the process that we were going to use moving forward. Task number 2 was a facility assessment. We brought engineers and architects over. We went through the building from top to bottom. If you're going to continue to use it, we wanted to make sure that any investment into the building was a valid investment and that the building would be there long-term for you folks. So the answer is good bones. But even a do-nothing solution will cost money. In other words, the structure and the envelope are in good shape. You've been maintaining it. You've got money in your budgets. I have to get my tenses right. You have money in the budgets to do things like replace roofs, which is what you did earlier this year. You've got money in budgets to do things like replace some of the aging mechanical equipment that's in the building. The interior finishes, however, are aging. They have not been updated in 25 years in a building with a lot of heavy use. Many of the mechanical systems are reaching the end of expected life. There is a detailed report of which ones those are. I'm not going to get into the details of that. The electrical systems have been upgraded on occasion, but not in a consistent manner. So when you walk through the building, you're going to see aging lighting in parts of the building, and you might see upgraded lighting in other parts of the building. There's also a problem where some of the changes made to some of those electrical systems over time, the old electrical systems weren't pulled out, so they're still there sitting side by side with some newer electrical systems, which creates some confusion in the building. All in all, though, the building is still a useful facility. Task number 3 was to look at how the existing building is being used, kind of looking at the functionality of that existing building. The interesting thing about that diagram that you're seeing in front of you is that in a well-organized, for instance, a brand new facility, all of those colors would want to be grouped together. Each of those colors represents a function within the building. So when those functions get spread out, they're becoming less and less efficient. That happens over time in buildings when you have multiple additions, multiple expansions that are done without doing a cohesive expansion. In this particular case, the police department took over parts of the fire department at one point in time. There was an addition added at one point in time, and now City Hall has moved out, which is another point in time. Now you're taking a look at the whole building. That's what we're doing, taking a look at the whole building and say, how do we make this an efficient and workable police department? Starting from the idea of we really want it to work like it's supposed to work. So, for instance, just a couple of for instances to look at. The brown, the orangish brown, the number 9, that's evidence and property. You can see it sitting there in 4 different pieces. That's the evidence coming in on one side of the building. That's the evidence being moved over to another side of the building to be processed, moved to a third location to be stored, and then the supervisory staff for that are in an even 4th location. So you can see that there's some discontinuity in that particular function. Number 10, though, that's personnel support, that's staff support, that's their locker rooms, that's their fitness room, that's their training spaces. They're all nice, cohesively located. One item that I think is very interesting is number 3. That is the patrol functions. They're minuscule. There's not nearly enough space in that building for patrol to be doing their job. Now, granted, they do that job out on the street most of the time. Their office is a squad car, but they still need support spaces back in the building. They still need supervisory functions going on. They still need their superiors to be able to see and know what they're doing, and there's not a lot of ability for doing that on one of the main functions of the department. Task number 4 is projecting growth. There's a direct connection within policing between the size of a community and the size of the police department. If you assume that you want your police department to continue providing the same level of service they have in the past into the future, then essentially you need to grow your police department consistent with the growth in your community. On the left is the chart that comes directly out of your comprehensive plan that shows what the city's projections are for its population growth. On the right, those blue bars represent past staffing of your police department. On the right side of the right chart, you'll see us projecting into the future. If you continue the same staffing levels you've had in the past and to match your growth in population, you get the equation that runs across the bottom of that slide. 73,822 people projected in the city of Minot 25 years from now, times 2.05 officers per thousand, which is the average you've had over the past 25 years, is going to equal 151 total staff 25 years into the future. That's the number that we are basing what you're going to see on the next several slides on. Task number 5 is the space needs analysis. The slides you're seeing on the screen is the summary of several meetings we had with a lot of folks from the police department, where we looked at each one of the operational units within the police department. For instance, administration, the command staff underneath the office of the chief, patrol, investigations, etc. Each one of those has an entire page worth of rooms and spaces that define everything they need to be able to do their job. This is the summation of that. In the lower right-hand corner, the black boxes with a lot of white text in them are summing up some of those numbers, and I'm going to pull out some of the important ones. Existing area. The existing area of the building is 41,150 square feet. The total area required for 25 years, that's the third black line down, is 75,209 square feet. So as you can see, the projected area to maintain your current level of service, or to maintain a police department that will maintain your current level of service, is already 35,000 square feet more than what you have in that existing building. We created a couple of other numbers that we wanted to be able to bring to everybody's attention as we went through the process. For instance, municipal court. As a standalone facility, the municipal court will want approximately 3,900 square feet of space. So if it does not go into the building, then that's what you should be looking for, is about 4,000 square feet of space for them. We also looked at national standards for police departments of communities of your size to see how much square footage you would need, or any other community this size would be looking at if they were meeting national standards. That number comes out to be 33,353 square feet compared to the 75,000 square feet that our breakdown projected. So we are fairly confident that we are within the realms of where you should be. And then, as I said, that bottom number, additional space required for 25 years of 34,000, we need to find that much more space on the site to continue to use that site for the next 25 years. This is a quote that I really like when we start these projects, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about we want to make sure that we don't do what's been done in the past, where we just moved into vacant space and created more dysfunction within the department, right? We want to start with the assumption that the best way to do something is not the way we're doing it right now. We want to talk about how should it be done and make sure that if we're going to spend the kind of money we're talking about, that we're going to finish with a good, solid product. So this task has us looking at how do we solve the problem of adding 35,000 square feet to this building, and how do we arrange the spaces within this building to make sure that we've managed those workflow issues, that we've created essentially a solid, workable police department. The spaces that you see colored yellow on this diagram are where we're adding space. The grays are where are the existing building. You can see that rather than try to get all 35,000 square feet of needed space onto the existing site, we developed an option that uses the space on the block to the south, which is a municipally owned block. I'm going to cover this in a little more detail on the other slides, but I want to point out a few things. This piece is a new entrance that's on the front of the building that faces the main street. Right now, the police department's entrance is over here on the side. This would give the police department presence along a main street rather than an entrance that's hidden off to the side. This block of space is adding a squad garage. Right now, all of the vehicles, all the department's vehicles sit outside. Each one of those vehicles costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $65,000. Each one of those vehicles has another $60,000 some odd dollars of light bars and computers and recording devices and everything they need to do their job. So those cars are $120,000 a piece, and you have a lot of them sitting outside. They need to be inside. They need to be safe. They don't need somebody with a vendetta to go through and key them or break their windows. They don't need them battered in storms. They don't need them frozen in the winter when they need to go get them. They need them to work. So a squad garage has become a critical and important part of modern police departments. On this adjoining site to the south, this building would be reserved to be what is called what we are calling in this study a special operations building. It is taking things like the bomb squad, the critical response unit, the bicycle unit, some of those other functions that do not require an officer to access them directly. Generally speaking, for instance, if there's an issue for SWAT, which would be one of the groups in here, that they need to respond, then they are coming, they are almost all of them, in a squad car someplace. They're a member of the county sheriff's department. They might be a member of the fire department, but they're all coming to the department, getting their gear, getting their vehicles, and going to wherever they need to go. So having those in a separate building is not considered an issue, a major issue to the police department. The other building on that site is where we're showing a relocated municipal court. Municipal court is currently in a small corner here. It is much too small, and it is impacted by all the other functions going on in this building. It wants to get out of there. It wants to be a space that people in the community can find, so when they show up, when they go to court, they know where to go. However, in all of our work, it also does not want to go where we're showing it. It was part of our task to find a place for it. We wanted to make sure that it was included in all of our work, included in our cost estimates, included in our budgets, but the entire team pretty much agrees that this is not the best location for a municipal court. We were not tasked with finding the best location in municipal court, so we stopped at that location, or at that step. Some of the issues with this is that this is where the parking for court would be, but that's 5, 6, 7 feet lower than the road, which is then putting a road between that parking and the building. That all of those three things are challenging steps to having a good, well-functioning municipal court. The parking that's going on behind there, you see the parking you see behind that building would be staff parking. But in order to access that, we're coming through a secured parking that's part of the police department's secured parking. So it's challenging, yet again, to have all of these things overlapping each other. We talked about how changes could be made to Burdick Expressway, things like that, but it's just not the kind of road that wants to have access to municipal court off of it. So there's a lot of reasons, and they're spelled out in the report, that we don't believe municipal court wants to be on that corner. But like I said, the numbers, the costs, they're all included for that piece of the project. But again, we think that there should be some more study done about that solution. right? I'm going to try and avoid talking about all of the layout in this. The chief, like the chief said, we're not trying to solve this necessarily. This is the solution the team found to be best. This is the costs that are involved in doing the best job we can in solving this. We don't want everybody getting wrapped up in whether this space should be next to that space. But we do want to cover a couple of things just to talk about some of the benefits of this. As I said earlier, a new entrance with administration and the police chief and his command staff. All of the forward-facing pieces of the department are forward-facing, and they're by the front door, and they're by an obvious front door in the building, not tucked around a side or hidden back in a corner. The colors, again, the colors represent all the departments in the building, or that the department needs, right? All the subunits. And as you can see, those colors are much more cohesive than they were before. We went back to all those other steps and we said the usage diagrams are saying that we don't have a lot of cohesion in our department. The building assessment is telling us that the interior finishes all need replaced anyway. The mechanical systems need a lot of work anyway. The electrical system needs a lot of work. Therefore, this kind of restructuring of the inside of the building makes sense at this point in the building's life. If there were chunks of the building that had been remodeled 5 years ago, then we would be looking at ways to reuse them in the fashion that they're sitting there, but the building has not been refurbished in 25 years, so it needs it, and we're recommending that we do it. There are a few colors that do appear to be disjointed, but they are not a problem. Number 5, for instance. Number 5 are miscellaneous departments that all get lumped into the same grouping, but they don't need to be next to each other, and they don't need to necessarily be next to other departments, so they can be spread around. Number 12 is of particular interest. Those are spaces that the building will need to get through that last 5 to 10 years of its life. They're not assigned, but they are growth space. And by spreading them around the building, that is available for undetermined growth that we just can't place a need for it right now, but it will be needed according to all the calculations we've done. It can be conference spaces, it can be training spaces today, and then fitted out for offices for a future need, say a computer forensics department or something of that sort, or perhaps a drug task force unit or something that you're doing with state officers. Those kinds of things that we can't predict today, but might need space in the future. Second floor, same thing. We've utilized existing space. I'm not going to get into how you access all of that, but we worked hard to find ways to use all the space in the building in an appropriate fashion. And again, we talked about this block. It's just showing, worked out diagrammatically, that we can make the spaces work the way we would like them to work. We developed a list of pros and cons for this option that we would like to share with you, and I am going to read through these because they are important. There are some nuances in these pros and cons. The new plan that we just looked at resolves the space needs issues for 25 years. That was our directive. It continues to use a building that still has some years of use remaining. It improves efficiency throughout the PD by renovating and improving most of the areas of the building. Security and confidentiality will be improved for the public, staff, and detained persons. The construction of a new squad garage will provide tempered vehicle storage. The facility is centrally located, but the department's resources are mobile. That was an item that got talked about quite a bit. The police department likes being central. The people of the community like the police department to be central. If they are not central, however, they are also very mobile. The squad cars are out all the time. It's not like the fire department where they need to be within 4 or 5 minutes of any fire at any point in anywhere in the city. The police department, the police cars are out there already in those locations. All right, cons. This new plan will utilize all available space on this site, challenging any future expansion. There are still numerous level changes throughout the building. We could not get rid of the level changes. Special operations will be located on an adjacent site. The police department can function that way, but it is not ideal. The municipal court is not adequately resolved. The special operations building invests in a new long-term building at this site. The assumption is that building will be built, good modern standards, as a 50-year building, but the police department itself is only being built to solve a problem for 25 years. So you will have a special operations building that is either out of place or built for a function that you want to move out of there. Renovations will cause disruptions to operations. We are doing a lot of remodeling in the building. We've looked at it enough to be confident that we can do that much renovation without getting in the way of operations, but there will be disruptions to operations while a year's worth of construction is happening. And then finally, investing in this building at this location continues ongoing investment in a location that is near the railroad tracks and near the floodplain. Two problems that the city has had and the police department has had in the past. I am going to really go fast through the next couple of slides, but these are items of the study that were important, very important to the staff. We talked about those must-haves and should-have line items. Those kinds of items are the things that staff brought forward to us about what was important in the new building to them. These next 4 slides, hopefully, immortalize that information, make it part of the study, and no matter what gets done, these concepts get brought forward so that this information doesn't get lost. Just to cover a couple of things, we talked about confidentiality and security and safety. We would be building a new front lobby where if somebody came in to report a crime, there would be a place they could go that a police officer could sit down with them while they fill out the police report so that they're not sitting in the lobby with everybody else in the lobby listening to their problems. It can be done safely and securely so the staff would feel safe interacting with the people they interact with every day. Another one is wellness. It's in big bold letters there. Wellness is important in police departments. It is a growing problem or growing recognized problem within law enforcement and fire departments for what it is worth. The mental health of the officers is important. We've designed in the opportunity to put wellness spaces into the building that give access to natural light, that open up spaces and give supervisory personnel the ability to see and interact with staff, so staff don't come into the building and end up in quiet space, end up in their own heads all day long. This gives them opportunity to interact with them, with other officers, interact with their supervisory personnel, et cetera. Those are the kinds of things that the staff were concerned that they wanted to make sure that we kept into this study. So, like I said, we're going to zip through some of those. You can look at those in your leisure and compare them back to the must-haves and want-haves in your decision-making. So finally, after all that work, we took the end result and we did a cost estimate on it. So, on the left, renovations and additions, that's the presented solution. The construction costs for that work, that is all the hard construction costs, are ranged from $34.7 million to $38.9 million. It's very early in the process. We don't want to nail this down to some number that everybody comes back later. We expect that the final number would be somewhere between those two. There are additional costs you need to consider, though, in making this decision. You want to make sure you include costs for furniture and equipment, for technology, for communications, for fees, all fees and contingencies. All of that has to be considered. That would add another 11.3 million to 13.2 million to the project, getting a total of 46 to 52.1 million dollars for the renovations and additions that we have shown in the solutions. Now, it's easy for us then to take that number, the number of square feet that we were going to build for the police department. That's the beauty of how that all came together, is that that's 71,000 square feet of space that we talked about earlier, or 75. I'd have to go back to look at the sheet. But taking those square foot and taking them times the average cost of a police department for a community your size. That's what we did to come up with the new construction numbers. So construction cost for the new building, for just the hard construction, would be 47 million to 52.9 million. We have those same additional costs, 15.4 million to 17.8 million, for total new construction of 62.4 million to 70.7 million dollars. Now, we took it one step further because these numbers are not necessarily apples to apples, because the new construction, like I said, when we talked about the new special ops building, that would be built to new construction standards and would be, good construction for 50 years. So if we built a new police department, that's what we would do, is we'd be building something that was going to last 50 years before it needed any kind of major, rebuilding. The renovations and additions, however, was only built as a 25-year solution. And as we said in the pros and cons, after 25 years, it will essentially be done. You will not be able to add on to that for the next 25 years of its life. So we looked at what would happen if you looked at this as a life cycle cost and tried to get more of an apples and apples comparison instead of apples and oranges. So in the report, you will find at the back, the last two sheets are looking at that kind of an analysis. This is looking at renovations and additions, right? The task we were given is, will the building work for 25 years if we do renovations and additions? So in year one, renovations and additions, and new construction then in 25 years. Because the renovations and additions will last 25 years. When it's done, you're going to have to purchase a new site and build a new building. The total investment then for that 50 years is 217 million in that scenario. If, however, you look at it a different way, which is to do new construction in year one, that's buying a new piece of property, which, by the way, in the new construction numbers, there is money in there to purchase a new site. New construction in year one with a small addition needed in 25 years. That investment over a 50-year solution is going to be 100.8 million total investment. Now, two things have happened. I've reached the end, and I've given you a lot of complicated information in those last two slides. Do I need to repeat those last two slides so that everybody understands the differences between the two of them? Good, thank you.
Are there any questions? Any comments? Steve, anything?
Yes, thank you. I have 5 specific questions that I think are more appropriate for city staff. So I will send them to John and ask him to get answers, some of which may have to go to the consultants. Some I think are more local ones. I do have a more general question though. I take it for granted that consultants are aware that we've recently hired a firm to do a comprehensive study of the organization and functioning of our public safety departments. Are they indeed aware of that?
Yes, we are aware of it.
Okay. To what extent do you think any decisions about your proposal should be deferred until they've come back to us with their own consultant's report?
So when I said we're aware, we know that that study is going on, but we are not necessarily aware of the directives they were given or their details. So we would be happy to discuss that issue with them to see what synergies might exist between the work we did and the work they're doing.
Okay, what I'm thinking is I know this isn't an engineering proposal or architectural proposal where you're assigning, amounts of space to specific functions or being, very detailed about things. But still, I think hearing from them would make me feel more comfortable. We're talking about a very large amount of money. And I'd like to have a sense of their thoughts about organization, structure, things like that before we spend money on concrete and furniture. So, yeah, I think I guess I'd ask staff to kind of, when they get back to me and us about these specific questions, to give us a reminder of the timeline for the other study. I don't think we can wait forever on this thing, but I feel uncomfortable at this point going ahead without hearing from the other consultants. So I guess that's the only point I'd like to make at this time, and only major thought that I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Lisa?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, just quickly, having been part of this process for a number of months, I do appreciate all of the questions that were asked and the answers that were provided. To boil it down to its very simplest form, I believe that the question that the council had was whether we are going to, in the future, look towards renovating the current building or building new. And I think through this very long process, but very informative process, we have really good information in front of us. So I'm grateful for the work that EABC has done and look forward to the conversation that we're going to have. But I think we have a little bit better idea of some of the questions that we needed answers to. So I'm appreciative for the work that was done.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other comments, questions? If not, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Harold.
Circle back to Alderman Padragula's question about the study that's being conducted by CPSM for both the police department and the fire department. I would say that the only potential overlap I see is with regards to the assumptions that were made at the beginning of the presentation with regards to future staff needs and growth based off of national standards. But the main thing that CPSM is going to be coming and doing is assessing our policies and procedures on how staff are doing their job. They will do some estimates and recommendations as well as far as what staff levels should be. But at the end of the day, I don't think that will overlap with the need to consolidate different elements of the building and the amount of square footage needed, unless the assumption with regards to how many police department staff are needed over the next 25 years. But I would assume that CPSM is going to be using the same national standards that EAPC has been using in conducting these calculations. So there may be some variation, but I would assume that both recommendations should be fairly consistent, and that I don't see the recommendations from EAPC changing significantly after we receive the results from CPSM. And then also to answer the timeline, CPSM is in a process to try and complete that study within the next 3 months. As Chief Klug mentioned earlier, this is an information. We're not in a hurry to rush this decision. And so there should be adequate time to get the results from CPSM and compare those with the study, whether any other tweaks are needed. But there'll be plenty of opportunity for the council and the community to work through that conversation and have access to the information of both of these reports.
I wanted to thank Harold for his input in response to my question. I guess I did have one further question. You talked about the life cycle costs overall, and I wanted to ask where the field of municipal consultation and municipal building is with this at this point. Is that something where more organizations are going toward that entire life cycle? Because the cost differences are pretty dramatic. On the other hand, if we can buy something that lasts us 25 years, who knows what the world will be like in 25 years. And, I think selling it to the public is going to be more challenging if we look at, 50 years worth of costs. On the other hand, logically, rationally, I think that's the way you have to look at it. It kind of reminds me of the old debate when it came to aircraft carriers in the Navy, that nuclear aircraft carriers cost an enormous amount of money. But when you price them out over, a lifespan of 25 or 50 years, or 30 years, I guess it is for aircraft carriers, they're much cheaper because of fuel costs than conventionally fueled ones, plus giving a lot of operational advantages. But it's always, it's always difficult to convince people to spend a lot more upfront. So thoughts about that?
Yes, I do have a couple of thoughts that I'll share. The decision to do it or to present that information of the life cycle cost came out of conversations that were, look, the analogy I said of, we realized that we were not looking at apples to apples comparisons to the numbers, that if a new building was going to solve the problem for a much longer period of time, then it was not quite giving the council all the full information that they would need to make an informed decision about whether to invest in that. Because you are correct that there's a lesser investment involved in solving the problem for 25 years, more investment to solve it for 50 years, but even more investment to solve it once for 25 and then solve it again for 50. That was the rationale that we came to, and that's the reason we did it the way we did. There is a lot of information going into life cycle costing. Generally speaking, though, it's looking at, should we invest more money in a more sustainable building because we're going to get payback out of lesser energy costs and those kinds of discussions. That's what generally drives life cycle costing. But like I said, this one was just trying to get us to a more apples to apples kind of discussion about long-term solutions for the city.
And is that the way other municipalities are looking at it too, in your consulting work with work of other consultants?
Yeah, like I said, if we were looking at trying to, about whether we should be building the most energy efficient building, whether we should be investing in solar panels on the building, whether we should be investing in a geothermal system, then yes, life cycle is how we'd be talking about it. Not in this particular case, Minot's particular case, with the idea of we're going to invest in a building for 25 years, but we're not going to be able to use it beyond that point, is kind of a unique condition.
Anything else, Steve?
I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Chief?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'll just close with a couple comments. You've all seen the building and the condition that it's in today. As far as the difference between new versus renovation, I'm not going to give an opinion on that tonight. I'll save that for a later meeting. We've only invested what we've needed to keep that building usable. If there's a safety concern, mechanical issue, those are the investments we're making. Much like you said, there's a lot of the surfaces in the building itself are definitely used and abused a little bit. And then finally, you see the slide up on the screen. We want to make sure that people that couldn't be here tonight have the opportunity, or even if they are here tonight, including yourselves, we're having 2 public open houses where we'll be taking people on tours through the building so they can see. We took a focus group through last week, I think it was Wednesday, and they were amazed with what they saw. So we would like to open it up for all of the public who are interested in seeing what our current home looks like, to join us on October 5th and 10th between 3 and 7. Municipal Court is also going to be available and be open. So if anybody wants to see that, they can transition between the two as they wish. But for tonight, that is all I have. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Are there any questions of John? If not, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, before we hit item 10, I just was made aware by staff, I just need to do a little bit of clarification on going back to the budget. And Dave, you might want to come up. The question came up on, Carrie, your intention on the healthcare, the savings in the healthcare. What were your intentions on levying the tax dollars and saving the money, or not levying the tax dollars?
My intention was to reduce that amount from whatever fund we were going to put it in.
Is that
I don't
as
know
a
which one that is.
as a second? Was that your intention? So, Dave, is there any thought or recommendation if we have to do anything moving forward to make that a clarification?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think the language that, the exact language that was used could certainly be interpreted to mean that. I appreciate the clarification so we know exactly what our marching orders are. I guess I would defer to the city attorney, but I think that as long as we know that that's the intent, the language can be interpreted that way, I think we'd be okay. I just want to make sure that we are all clear that the levy will not be reduced by the entire amount of the difference of the health insurance, because some of those are in funds that are enterprise funds and special revenue funds. So we'd do the math to calculate out what the levy affected. The levy wouldn't reduce by the entire amount of the health insurance savings.
Sure. Steph, any comments on that?
And barring any objection from any member of the council to that understanding, then I think that can just stand as the clarification from the council.
Is there any objection?
No, I think that's...
Any objection? Okay, thank you, Dave.
Thank you for making that clear for us.
Thank you. If not, if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.